So in this segment, we're going to be talking about an article found in the Telegraph, which is after 6 wasted years, Liz Truss is about to deliver a Brexit that actually works. I put the quotes from the article in italics, and the non-italic stuff is the stuff I've written down. So it's just a bit easier for people to follow on a bit. So I might go off script on occasion, but just how I am. So you got this guy's nonsense article saying it's been clear for years that our putrefying economy is in desperate need of shock therapy. The Tories have been in charge since 2010, and they're mad at themselves. I'm not saying economic orthodoxy is always right. It does change, which makes sense, but we know trickle-down economics does not work, yet here we are trying it again. Yet instead of addressing its many horrific pathologies, our ruling class, well served by the status quo, has stubbornly blocked radical surgery. I mean, the ruling classes, this guy talking about like he's not a part of the establishment. The result has been catastrophic. Poland and Slovenia are catching up with the UK in terms of middle class lifestyles, and our desperate young people can't afford to buy a house, which has become much more difficult now because the interest rates are going up. So how does Truss's actions making interest rates rise help first-time buyers? Also, Slovenia and Poland are EU members, which shows that these countries have benefited from being a part of the EU and probably following that economic orthodoxy that this man hates so much. David Cameron, Clegg, George Osborne, Theresa May, and tragically even Boris Johnson must all share the blame. None of them had the conviction or courage to dismantle Gordon Brown's command and control system, to undo the creeping bureaucratization of Britain, to reverse our slow transformation into the worst stereotype of a stagnant, decadent, obese, overtaxed European welfare state. And we're not that overtaxed, especially when you compare it to Scandinavia. They have much higher taxes than us on the higher end of the scale. He talks about, from words I can't pronounce there, easy credit, rocketing house prices, and triple-up pensions. I mean, the triple-up pensions there to protect pensioners from inflation. It's just ironic that the Tories... Why would the Tories get rid of triple-up pension when a large group of their voters are pensioners? It doesn't make any sense. Growth under Blair was pretty comparable to the US and other G7 countries, from what I've read. You notice this person doesn't mention which countries have carved their own path on the economy, going for this trickle-down economics and actually succeeded. He hasn't mentioned any, in this article, he doesn't mention any developed economies that followed that path and made it. Until a few weeks ago, it seemed as if Brexit, that ultimate act of popular democratic rebellion, which they won by like 2%, he's trying to act like it was like a 30% landslide. That last mechanism to railroad the nomenclature into reforming has been neutered, turning it into yet another excuse for tinkering and fiddling and wasting taxpayers' money on bogus levelling up and pseudo-devolution. The thing is that the levelling up thing could have been good. It could have genuinely been good. It could have revolutionised, town centres and other things. But clearly, this man does not want that. He does not believe in levelling up, despite that being a part of Brexit. He's to argue that Brexit has create this new catalyst into this new massive growth world which has been stopped by Johnson, the arch-Brexiteer. What these people want is radical reform and deregulation. These things will cause absolute chaos in the UK. We've spoken about, the absolute chaos it would cause previously when Rees-Mogg wanted sparkling wine to be made in plastic bottles, for example. Then suddenly, at 1 minute to midnight, just as all hope appeared lost, and stagflation looked like the new normal, we have suddenly been rewarded with a new Prime Minister apparently intent on a revolutionary shift in policy. Unlike the last four Tory PMs, she's a true believer in the power of free markets and liberal economics. And again, we've tried this with Thatcher, they tried it with Reagan. It doesn't work to deliver growth and prosperity. Her plans appear almost too good to be true. And that's because they are, because she's gotten rid of she's going to keep the top 45% tax rate, and, which I doubt this guy will be happy about. Exactly what free market critics have been calling for, far from the far fringes of what a wilderness for so many years. This guy's he's a libertarian dreamer, that's what he is. Her plans were too good to be true, hence why she keeps blocking the OBR forecasts and reports. If Truss had the plans to grow the economy, she would have shown us. Instead, bonds are tanking and interest rates are rising. The free market mantra is dead. Just leave it dead, please. Truss wants a Thatcherite Brexit, that's funny. The only kind that will actually work. She will weaponize tax and regulation to suck capital and jobs out of Europe. Ironically, the jobs are going the other way, though. They're going to Europe. If she gets her way and isn't derailed by useful Tory idiots or an apoplectic left-wing establishment, who are the left-wing establishment? The Guardian, the Observer, the Independent. Both Britain finally has a chance of becoming the low-tax, sensibly regulated the offshore, high value added, pro services, pro science, pro technology, pro economic centre that Eurosceptics have dreamt about ever since Thatcher's Burgess speech of 1988, even though Thatcher was a massive advocate of the single market. The idea that Brexit is something Thatcher would have wanted, I think, is ridiculous. How this paragraph is not satire is beyond me. Thatcher would have supported Remain. She helped create the single market. How dense is this guy? Because of Brexit, jobs have left the UK, gone to the EU. Same with funds as well. Many banks and finance businesses took their funds out of the UK. Once the EU members have the clearinghouses needed to deal with all the traders, we'll see even more money taken out of the UK. It's something I've talked about in the past. If you look at all of the stuff he wants the UK to be, can you point out any country that exists which is like it? Maybe Singapore, which is a city-state and has issues with people who are not rich, essentially welfare, people on welfare and low wages. It's the idea that the UK will become a top service economy, but what happens to people who are not the best in their field? If their great Thatcher could not achieve this dream, why would her cheaper version be able to do it? That's the thing that also doesn't make sense. Of course, many Brexit voters had different visions, but Truss gamble correctly, that doesn't make sense, is that what counts is what works, rather than what is popular in the short term. She hopes such voters will back her if she can deliver a drastic increase in prosperity across the country. We're 2 years out from an election, pal. She's got 2 years. She hasn't got time for a long-term gamble. And I'm old enough to remember when Farage told us we wanted to be like Norway, but Truss's actions are a huge gamble that she's already lost. The markets don't trust her. She's just getting started, but it's already over. She's deeply unpopular now, and she'll be just as unpopular if she makes it to the next general election. Big if there. Ideology is back, and Britain is at a turning point. Either Truss has enough time and capital to deliver the massive changes that are required, ushering in a new golden age, or it's already too late and we end up with the most left-wing government since Harold Wilson. So essentially saying if the reason why Truss is going to fail is because you don't have enough time. I mean, that's ridiculous. She's got, again, 2 years. It's not a long time, but if her plans are so great and growth will happen so quickly, she's got nothing to worry about. And there you have it. It's all based on ideology that doesn't work. Thatcher and Reagan both failed for a reason. There's a reason why orthodoxy has moved from the absolute free market mentality. It's because it failed. You need some state intervention. Where you draw that line between what the free market does and what the state does is debatable. But to argue for absolute free marketism is lunacy. And let's not forget, if it wasn't for the Bank of England stepping in, which is effectively part of the state in a way, it's independent, but it's part of the state in a sense, central bank. If they did not step in and stabilise the market when they did, there would be a lot of pensions liquidating right now. And that would have been the free market at play. Truss rejects the failed social democratic consensus of her predecessors. Absurdly, most orthodox thinkers have convinced themselves that nothing can really boost growth apart from, that is, from rejoining the single market. If we could rejoin the single market, it would boost growth because of the trade barriers we have with the EU would be gone. Not hard to understand. It would boost boost all services as well, because a lot of the service industry are struggling with all the paperwork. Even though most Western European countries are failing as badly or worse than us. If we look at the G7 members, that's really not the case. They are doing a lot better than us. The subtext is clear. We have sinned, and we must now rot in hell. Their only answer is to relentlessly increase taxes on the better off and to increase handouts. The cake's size is fixed, and we must redistribute to the death. I mean, the cake size is not fixed, because if you look at under Labour, the economy grew far more than under the last 10 years of the Tories. So that's not strictly true, but we do need to tax the rich more. He's not wrong there. I mean, he's being sarcastic, but it's not just about increasing handouts. It's to make sure people have the basics to live. That's the minimum a developed economy owes to its people. Also making sure that work actually pays, that people don't have to work insane hours for the basics to live. Redistribution is a large part of that. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, like the rest of the left-wing establishment, opposed Truss's tax cuts, just as it opposed Brexit. They were proved right on Brexit, and they'll be proved right on the tax cuts, especially since Liz Truss had to row back on him. If she had the plans, if she had the forecast she needed to justify it, she should have done so. But she's blocked the OBR reports for 2 months. Why has she done that? It calculates that the trend growth would need to return. Sorry, it calculates. So this will be the IFS here. That trend growth would need to return to the much stronger rate seen between 1983 to 2008, when Thatcher's reforms had begun to be felt until they were finally wrecked. I mean, who wrecked them at that point? 1983 to 2008, Labour only charged 2 years after that, and then from 2010 it was the Tories. So are you saying David Cameron tanked Thatcher's reforms is ridiculous, rather than the much feebler expansion seen during the 2010s, merely to stabilise the national debt as a fraction of national income. So you're telling me that we felt growth actions until 2008. What did Labour do in 2008 that stopped it? 11 years after they came into power to stop Thatcher's miracle growth policies. Because Thatcher's policies were so great, it carried on from the 80s all the way to 2008. You're talking almost 30 years. What an insane argument, and then blaming 3 Tory PMs for not following Thatcher's ideas when Cameron committed to tax cuts and further privatisation, just like Thatcher did. Under Labour Party, we had a 50% tax rate for the most wealthy. There was obviously the tax bans, and we also obviously had Royal Mail were owned by the state. Cameron privatised it and cut taxes, so he did what Thatcher would have done, and yet he's not Thatcher enough. Yet the IFS doesn't seem to grasp why Truss will be unfazed. Yet she's not unfazed. She's already backed out. There is a new dividing line in British politics between those who believe that much faster sustainable growth is possible. Those people who understand what realism is, and those people who live in a libertarian utopia. This man lives in a libertarian utopia. If rapid tax cuts and deregulations led to growth, no one would have changed their economic plans from the 70s and the 80s. There's a reason why this dude is calling these actions a gamble, and even though in my opinion it won't work, you just create an even worse country to live in, with even more power to corporations and the rich. Even the city don't have faith in these tax cuts, especially when she's funding them via borrowing. There's no actual plan here. A gamble gives you a chance of winning. We don't have that. Growth won't happen, and exports will tank even harder if we deregulate. Our present low growth rut is not sustainable with an ageing population. Truss is betting the house on boosting the annual rate of GDP expansion back to 2.5% or more by massively incentivising investment, rebooting the city, bolstering house building and construction, drastically increasing energy output and triggering an entrepreneurial revolution, just like Thatcher did. And why can't she? Well, you see, Thatcher privatised a lot of stuff, which Liz can't do because they're obviously private now. I'm no expert on that period of time. I can't tell you much outside of that. Thatcher really pushed the City of London, and I think that was ahead of kind of our EU rivals. Combined with a lot of the Thatcher deregulation of services, helped the UK became a trading hub. But that was because of the EEC. The UK had free access to trade around the EU financial services. It's kind of like how it is now, I think. And if you look at the amount of services, the exporting services went up. You can see it went up massively. And services where the money's at. Services are typically worth more than goods. So as far as I'm aware, in that period of time, because of the UK increased so much exports in financial services, if you look at around 88, that's this kind of Thatcher's era here. You can see a really dramatic rise, especially under Labour. So I think that's what really caused the growth. It was kind of free access to services, but also the privatisations, which gave the state more money. But there's only so many things you can privatise before you run out of other people's stuff to sell. Here you can see the rise in services during Thatcher's time. This can't happen again because we won't have access to those EU markets as easily, and they won't have access to us, especially when they sort their clearing situation out. Big problem for Truss that Thatcher did not have. The left is wrong. The danger is that Truss would be too bold. It is that she'll be cowed by defeatist propaganda to doing too little. Go for it, Prime Minister. This is your one chance to engineer a British Renaissance. In the end, people like this will argue Truss did not go far enough, hence why it'll ultimately fail, or they'll claim, Truss didn't have enough time. And these people will somehow argue that only if we had gambled more, that we would have been successful. What a sad existence these people have. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I won't have to read too many more articles from jokers like this.